No DQ Galaxy. We are live with a recap of AEW Dynamite for January the 4th, 2023. This is not only a recap, but my ranking of the segments and matches on the show from worst to best. Dylan Hensley sent in a $2 super chat wanting to know the new format. Basically, I'm going in the order of my least favorite segment to my most favorite segment. That's the new format for 2023. Still recapping everything that happened on the show. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. I very much appreciate it. Good old JM Jeff Meacham sent in a $2 super chat. Thank you for that, Jeff. Says, definitely going next week. Maybe the San Francisco shows too. Next week's Dynamite is in Los Angeles, California. Hope Jeff has a good time there. I hope everybody attending has a good time next week. AEW Dynamite, always a lot of fun live. You always have that great atmosphere, or almost every time. Now, the first thing I wanted to talk about before I do my ranking, new intro for Dynamite. Same music, but new colors, new special effects, a brand new set, which I really like. More of a focus on the LED lights. The stage has lights with the effects and everything. Lots of screens. Some criticized it for looking maybe a little bit too much like WWE, but I think it definitely looks more Major League. I will say that. I know people liked the tunnels, but to be totally honest, I never really liked the tunnels all that much. It reminded me of TNA. TNA had the tunnels for the faces and the heels. So I was never really a fan of it for that reason alone. I like what they have now. I think it looks professional and it makes the company look Major League. So let's get into the segments. I do agree that maybe red and blue are not the ideal colors, considering that's what Raw and SmackDown use. But overall, I really like the look of the show. I like the new graphics. I do think it's an upgrade from what they had before. Coming in at number 9, I have 9 matches / segments ranked for this show. This was AEW's debut in Seattle, Washington, and they brought the heat. Red hot crowd. Hopefully this means Seattle will get more shows. They had a strong turnout, close to 10,000 fans. Not a sellout, but one of the better attended AEW shows in recent months. We had the number 9 segment, which probably not a surprise to too many people out there that have been following the No DQ channel for a while. The women's match, which was a little bit later than usual, 9:35 instead of 9:20. But let's be real here. It was the segment before the main event. It had that slot, which usually is not something too significant. We had Jade Cargill and Red Velvet against Skye Blue and Kiera Hogan. Not much to say about it. There was a storyline. Basically, Jade Cargill is having a falling out with Red Velvet. Kiera Hogan was already kicked out of the baddies. Red Velvet and Blue Skye Blue, whatever her name is, they traded some near falls in the early goings of the match. And then Jade Cargill came in and took care of business, but her and Red Velvet were not getting along. And after a chokeslam to Kiera Hogan, Jade basically had things set up for Red to finish off Hogan. But then when Jade went for the tag, Red stepped off the apron, and Jade was upset about this. Kiera Hogan came in with a roll-up, almost won the match, but then Jade Cargill finished her off with the pump kick, got the 1-2-3 victory. Yeah, weakest segment on the show, in my opinion, but it was okay. Wasn't terrible or anything, but yeah, did not really care too much about it. Coming in at number 8 was the Ass Boys, the Gun Club, paying tribute to FTR. There was a graphic on the big screen, FTRIP. You had photos of FTR in the ring, and basically the Gun Club said ever since they beat FTR, it was all downhill for FTR. Their dad bods could not handle the pressure of holding all the titles. And one by one, they lost all the titles, the Ring of Honor titles, the AAA titles, and then this week, the IWGP Tag Team titles. They said that FTR may have been 5-star FTR, but they were 10 stars in the hearts of the Gun Club. But then they started taking some shots. They said that FTR started a podcast that nobody listens to. And then the Gun Club had a moment of silence for FTR. FTR's music hit. Crowd popped big for this, but it was a fake out. No FTR. And then the Gun Club said that FTR will never work in AEW again. Top Guns out. It was a decent segment, but it was very WWE-like, which is good or bad depending on what you're looking for. Kind of like a low-rent WWE segment. It had its entertaining moments, but yeah, the Ass Boys, one could argue maybe these guys are not exactly ready for prime time at this stage of the game, but they're getting the opportunity. Coming in at number 7, and I put 2 segments together, basically, the sit-down interviews to set up next week's women's tag team match. The first sit-down interview was Tony Schiavone speaking with Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, and the women's champion, Jamie Hayter. And we had a little tease here. We're trying to find out who is Saraya's mystery opponent for the tag team match next week. Britt Baker said that there are some top-tier athletes like Toni Storm and Hikaru Shida, but it's not going to matter because Jamie Hayter is the world champion, and then Britt Baker said that she is the boss. Hint, hint. Teaser. Possible spoiler for next week. And she finished off the promo by saying Jamie's the killer and she's the pillar. Now, Colin Andrew brings this up. The other sit-down segment was Saraya with Toni Storm and Hikaru Shida. Renee Paquette asked the question, who's the mystery partner? And Saraya said she's sitting next to the best women's wrestler there is in AEW. Toni Storm and Hikaru Shida were there, and Saraya looked over at Toni Storm and picked her as the tag team partner. Hikaru Shida was not happy about this. She was very upset. She basically got dissed by Saraya. So what's happening here? We got the Mercedes Moné tease for next week, but then out of nowhere, Saraya picks Toni Storm. I think this is a red herring. This definitely seems like a swerve, and I'm guessing Hikaru Shida is going to attack Toni Storm, and that will put Toni Storm out of the running, and then that'll be when Mercedes Moné steps in. But I think this is a little odd. They did not do the angle on the show. I think they should have done the angle on the show so there's that cliffhanger and people are like, well, wait a minute, who's going to be the mystery partner now? Instead, we're now thinking, oh, it's Toni Storm. Even though I think it's a red herring, it was odd how this was done because now people are going to think that it's not Mercedes Moné. Caleb Jacobs sent in a $2 super chat, says, but Britt is not the legit boss. Very true. Now, and thank you for the super chat, Caleb. They could do an angle on Rampage. Rampage is live this Friday in my old stomping grounds, Portland, Oregon. Battle of the Belts will also be live. AEW could very well do an angle there, but who really watches Rampage? I guess, 500,000 still watch Rampage, but I would have done the angle on Dynamite. I would have cut to the backstage area and Hikaru Shida left Toni Storm laying. And then that sets it up on Dynamite when you have the most eyeballs. Did not fully understand the setup here for next week, but I do think it's a red herring. Coming in at number 6 in the rankings, Swerve Strickland versus AR Fox. Very good match here, but I'll tell you why it's not higher, because I did not think for a minute that AR Fox was beating Swerve Strickland. Swerve Strickland in his stomping grounds. He's from Tacoma, Washington. He got a huge pop from the fans, like massive, even though he's a heel, and it was acknowledged on commentary that he's from Tacoma. And we also got a little shout out to Defy Wrestling, which is a very good independent promotion in the Seattle, Portland area. I definitely recommend checking it out if you live in that region, the Pacific Northwest. And we also got a Lucha Underground reference as well. So good match here. And you had the interference from the Mogul affiliates, whatever they're called. I kind of like Mongol affiliates just because they're like these warriors from another land. But they're I'm not even trying to pronounce it. So I'm just going to call them the affiliates, the Mogul affiliates. They took a cheap shot. Swerve got the upper hand, but Fox stayed in it. He held his own, hit a cutter and a 450, but of course, Swerve kicked out. Crowd was chanting, "This is awesome." It was a good match. It was Seattle's first time getting to see Dynamite live, but it was a good match. I'm not sure I would do the "This is awesome" chant for it, though. You had Parker B handing an object to Swerve, and Swerve hit a DVD on the apron and then picked up the win with the Swerve stomp. So they protected AR Fox in defeat. Fine, whatever. Dylan Hensley sent in a $5 super chat. Thank you for that, Dylan. Says, at least they didn't reveal Saraya's partner next week. That would have been much worse. I think we'll see Mercedes soon, but they shouldn't have teased us. Well, I like the tease. You want as many eyeballs on Dynamite as possible. So I would definitely do the tease, kind of like what happened with CM Punk, maybe with a little wink, wink. And we did get a wink from Britt Baker. So there was that tease, but it was very subtle. I would have liked a little bit more of a direct tease and even flat out say we're kicking off Dynamite next week with the women's tag team match, because every week the highest rated segment of Dynamite is typically that opening segment. They have the Big Bang Theory lead in, and it almost always does over 1 million for the first segment. I would have announced next week we're opening Dynamite with that women's tag match. No 9:15, 9:30. It's opening the show, so it's important. And I'm guessing the ladder match with the Young Bucks and Death Triangle will be the main event. So kick off the show hot. I would have done that. I would have done this whole setup a little bit differently. And I still think it's Mercedes, though, despite the whole Toni Storm thing. Coming in at number 5 for this week, Bryan Danielson versus Tony Nese and the post-match promo segment. I'm combining them together. Like Swerve Strickland, this was Bryan Danielson's neck of the woods. Massive reaction. He's from Aberdeen, Washington, which is 2 to 2.5 hours from Seattle, from what I recall, driving in that area. And this was, entertaining, but it's Tony Nese. You know Bryan Danielson's winning here. And Nese did get in some offense, but Bryan did pick up the win by submission. And then after the match, we had a lengthy post-match promo. Caleb Jacobs sent in a $2 super chat. Thank you, Caleb. Says, wasn't WrestleMania 19 in Seattle in 2003? Indeed, it was at Safeco Field. And I got the opportunity to see the Foo Fighters there in 2018. I traveled to Seattle from Portland just so I could, not so much see the Foo Fighters, but get to be at the venue that hosted WrestleMania 19. And I'm not a baseball fan, so had to go to a concert. Foo Fighters ended up playing in Portland, which I went to that as well. I could have just done that, but wanted to go to the place where WrestleMania 19 was. And it was a fun experience. So anyways, Bryan Danielson cut this promo. He called out MJF. MJF arrived. He called Bryan brain-damaged Bryan. And he said he was not going to fight Bryan Danielson in Seattle. He gets a big fat check whether he wrestles or not. And then he said if Lance Storm and Dean Malenko had a love child, they would still have more charisma than Bryan Danielson. And then took a shot at Bryan's mother, saying that she was having trouble, like most women in Washington, trying to find a human suitor. Bryan's response was MJF's mom had no trouble finding a human suitor. She had many of them, including people in the audience. Then MJF continued his insults, saying that people call Bryan the king of wrestling, but those people are journalists that live in their mom's basement and fans that never stepped foot in a ring, no athletic bone in their body. And then MJF said he's been praised. He's been put over by top names in the business. Names such as Disco Inferno, Eric Bischoff, and Jim Cornette. I thought this was great. I love the references to these guys to get the heel heat. Is this the first time we got a Jim Cornette name drop on Dynamite? Man, do I want to see Jim Cornette actually be on the show. Hell, you brought in Jeff Jarrett. Imagine Jim Cornette on AEW. I would love that, but don't think it's going to happen. And Disco Inferno, he had to be thrilled, man. Guy hasn't been in the business in decades, and he got his name mentioned on national television just for running his mouth on social media and his podcast, or Conan's podcast. Crowd was very upset. They were yelling, "Shut the F up" at him. And then MJF made an offer to Bryan. He said that if Bryan could win the next 5 weeks on television, he has to win 5 weeks in a row, he will get an opportunity. Bryan will get a world title match at the AEW Revolution pay-per-view on March 5th. Bryan said he's fine with doing that, but he wants to pick the submission. One submission a stipulation, Bryan proposed a stipulation where MJF would have to prove he is, in fact, the best wrestler in the world. And that is a 1-hour Iron Man match. Holy cow. Revolution's going to be like a 6-hour pay-per-view. Whew. Oh, boy. So MJF accepted this after Bryan busted out the maxi pad line again. He said that Bryan will choke just like he's been choking since Bryan joined AEW. Bryan said he'll run through every single opponent that MJF throws at him, and he's going to expose MJF and kick his damn head in at the Revolution pay-per-view. I enjoyed the segment very much. It was middle of the road for this show as far as the segments go. And the reason being is that I think, first of all, it ran too long. Like, this promo seemed to drag on for a very long time. That's one thing. Number two, they're saving the match for Revolution, but man, like, we got a month of matches where we know Bryan's going to win every single one of them. I mean, they obviously set up the Iron Man match. It's going to happen. There's really no suspense here. Bryan's going to win his matches, kind of like Young Bucks and Kenny Omega versus Death Triangle, like best of 7. You know they're going to the 7th match. You know Bryan's going to win every match. And the other issue is that it's another rehash, like the third one now, of MJF putting his opponent through the hoops, and they've almost made a joke out of it at this point. So yeah, I mean, they're trying to stretch this storyline out and save this match for the Revolution pay-per-view. I agree with City by the Bay. Kind of lazy in my opinion, but it was still a very good segment. MJF was great. Love the references and the name drops to the controversial wrestling personalities. Next thing you know, he'll start praising the Road Dogg and Booker T for their takes. You know that's coming next. Coming in at number 4, we had Tony Schiavone in the ring interviewing Hangman Adam Page. And he asked the question, is Adam Page able to wrestle? Adam Page said, unfortunately, he is still not cleared. And if he fights Moxley, it could prolong his return. But he said next week, Doc Sampson said that Page should be ready to go to fight Jon Moxley. And he said that he's going to, and I quote, knock Moxley's dick in the dirt. I can't believe I just said that. Moxley arrived, got in the ring. We had a face-off. He was having trouble with his mic. Crowd said, we can't hear you. Moxley was like, what the F? And then he started to cut his promo on Page, said that Page has been playing the victim because he got knocked out. Page responded by saying he's been knocked out many times, including being knocked out by his so-called best friends. Page said he's looking for revenge at the Forum in Los Angeles next week. Moxley said next time won't be any different from what happened last time when Page got the concussion. And Moxley said he'll make sure that next time Page doesn't get back up. I ranked this higher than the MJF Bryan segment because they got to the point. It did not drag. I thought it was the perfect amount of time, built up heat very nicely, setting up whatever they're doing next week. I mean, this could end up being dragged out to Revolution as well. But yeah, I thought that this was all well done. Both guys did a great job and no complaints. Caleb Jacobs with a $3 super chat. Thank you for that, Caleb. Says, technically, Eric Bischoff was in AEW once too. That is true. Eric Bischoff was the moderator for that Orange Cassidy and Chris Jericho segment back during the pandemic. I know a lot of fans try to block out all that stuff from their memory, but yes, Eric Bischoff was on Dynamite maybe twice. I think he was on twice, but I know he was on once for sure. Coming in at number 3, Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal challenging the Acclaimed for the AEW Tag Team titles. I was getting scared, guys. I thought we were going to have a title change here for more than one reason. The first reason was actually the music. Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal have new music, basically their themes combined, you know, one of those old style remixes like what WWE acts would do, like Chris Jericho and The Big Show would combine their theme songs, or Randy Orton and Matt Riddle. So I'm thinking, well, you put in the effort to give these guys a new theme song. They must be winning the tag team titles. The Acclaim came out, and we got the reference to Karen Angle, how she is getting more hate than Skip Bayless. And Max Caster brought up Dixie Carter, said that TNA stands for Total Nonstop Acclaim. Crowd was loving this. And Max Caster was continuing to troll Jeff Jarrett. He did the Kurt Angle taunt, the celebration, and then put on the ankle lock on Jay Lethal. And they did the Scissor Me Timbers, but then Jarrett had a plan. They ended up getting Billy Gunn ejected from ringside. And that's when Jarrett and Lethal got control of the match. Crowd was chanting F you, Jarrett. I'm sure TBS loves these FU chants. Bowens tagged in, and then Satnam Singh sent Max Caster into the steel steps, and then the referee ended up kicking Singh out of the ringside area, and referees had to come down to enforce this because Singh is such a beast. Can't handle him with just one referee. And back in the ring, Jeff Jarrett hit the stroke. Jay Lethal went for the pin, and Anthony Bowens got his foot on the rope, but Sanjay Dutt pushed the foot off the rope. Referee did not see it. The referee counted 3, and Jeff Jarrett held up the AEW tag team titles. Oh man, I could just imagine people across the country reacting to this. This was like the ultimate troll job by AEW because people just did not want to see this whatsoever. Oh man, it was a swerve. You had Aubrey Edwards, who was also one of the most over people on the show because she's from Seattle. She's also Pacific Northwest based. And she informed the referee of the match that Sanjay Dutt pulled some shenanigans. So the match was restarted, and sure enough, the Acclaimed got the win. Bowens reversed Lethal's pin attempt and got the 1, 2, 3. And then after the match, Jarrett and Jay Lethal were pissed off backstage. You don't piss off Jeff Jarrett. And there's going to be a rematch at Battle of the Belts, no holds barred match. So maybe the Acclaim, they end up losing the titles. I was thinking this, like if FTR, if they're going to have a run at the AEW tag team titles, wouldn't it make more sense to have a heel team to challenge? The Acclaimed or baby faces, although you could do faces versus faces. So we'll see what happens. Battle of the Belts is live, like I said earlier, this coming Friday. Coming in at the number 2 spot for this week, we had Chris Jericho versus Absolute Ricky Starks, which was the opening segment. Crowd was loving referee Aubrey Edwards. They were chanting her name. And Starks was going after Jericho. Jericho tried to slip to the outside. Starks threw Jericho into the steps. Both of them were on the apron, and Starks was suplexed by Jericho to the floor. That gave Jericho the upper hand. Crowd was chanting for Ricky. Jericho went for a lion salt, but Starks got his knees up. Jericho avoided the Rochambeau, put on the walls of Jericho, and you had Parker and Daddy Magic on the outside distracting the referee. Daddy Magic hit Ricky Starks with a baseball bat, and it looked like Ricky Starks was going to pass out, but right at the very last segment, Ricky Starks recovered, and he did manage to escape. And then 2.0 got knocked off the apron. Ricky Starks made his comeback. He hit the spear and got the clean 1, 2, 3 victory over Chris Jericho. I liked it. Ricky Starks gets a huge win. Jericho doesn't need the win at this point. He's trying to put over these guys. He's doing the right thing here for business. Ricky Starks gets a big win, maybe the biggest win of his career, as a matter of fact. After the match was over, JAS beat down Starks to build up the heat. Action Andretti came down to try and make the save. He had a steel chair, but then Anna Jay and Ty Conti got in the ring, or Ty Mello, excuse me, and Action got hit with a low blow. Jake Hager took Ricky Starks and power bombed him off the apron through a table below. Really good segment here. Love that Ricky Starks got the win. And then they did the big post-match beatdown to continue the heat, continue the storyline. Very well done. And finally, we had our main event segment of the evening. Number one, it was also the main event. Darby Allin challenging Samoa Joe for the AEW TNT title. Darby Allin got a special entrance. This was his neck of the woods, Seattle. AEW did a great job showcasing the Seattle people, Bryan Danielson, Darby Allin, Swerve Strickland. Joe put his hands on young Nick Wayne, who is a Pacific Northwest up-and-comer. He put his hands on him at ringside. Darby went right after Joe, used the skateboard, and they fought over by the stage. Darby got a ladder, jumped off the ladder from the top down onto Samoa Joe right there on the ramp. And then they finally got back in the ring. Well, before they did that, Joe gave Darby a Uranagi onto the steel steps. And then Joe targeted the knee of Darby. Darby started selling his knee after the ladder jump. And Darby slipped out of a muscle buster attempt. And then Joe ended up pulling off the turnbuckle pad. Joe put on the sleeper, but then Joe got sent into the exposed turnbuckle. And that's when Darby hit not one, but two coffin drops to pick up the win over Samoa Joe, becoming a two-time TNT champion. Joe loses here after beating Wardlow last week, but they did the turnbuckle spot. It took two coffin drops to get the win. So AEW did what they could to make Joe look strong in defeat. And you know what? It's the feel-good moment in Seattle. You want good business when you return to the city. Sting came down to the ring after the match. Confetti went off. Big celebration. We had a little bit of an overrun here, about a 2-minute overrun. Sting hugged Darby Allin. Darby held up the championship, and Dynamite went off the air. Great stuff here. Overall, Dynamite was an awesome show. Excellent show to kick off the new year. I give it a solid A. Almost one of the best Dynamites of all time. I mean, it was definitely up there, in my opinion. Definitely among the top 10% of AEW Dynamite episodes. Seattle was red hot, and we had a lot of fun segments, a lot of quality wrestling, building up next week, building up Revolution. Just a really fun show. So I give it a solid A. Great start to the new year. And next week, I suspect the momentum will continue with Dynamite being in Los Angeles, and they'll have another big crowd for next week. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. Very much appreciated. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube. Consider subscribing, youtube.com/AaronRiftNoDQ if you haven't already. And this Friday, I'll be back to recap SmackDown and rank the segments again from worst to best. Check out the shorts. No DQ is on TikTok at NoDQDOTCOM. And of course, at NoDQDOTCOM on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. And remember to say yes to NoDQ.com. And I will see you all next time.